Hello again, welcome to the Media Coach video tip. Today I want to talk about crisis communication. No particular reason, I just thought I would. So firstly, a book, secondly, a speech to watch, and thirdly, a little tip that might help you if you get into difficulties and have to answer really tough questions. So firstly, the book, this one here, Risk Issues and Crisis Management by Michael Register and Judy Larkin. It's a book been out now for over 20 years. I think it was published in 1997. An absolute Bible of how to manage a crisis, how to assess risk, how to manage a crisis, how to say the right thing at the right time. And saying the right thing at the right time will help you manage. It won't make something go away if you've done something wrong, but if you deliver something in the right sort of way, it will help you to get through it and come out the other side. And this book, Risk Issues and Crisis Management, absolutely brilliant volume, which tells you how you can deliver a message in the most effective way, even if you've got bad news to deliver. And sometimes we all have to deliver bad news from time to time, so thoroughly recommend that volume. Secondly, a speech to watch. And this time we're going back a long way. We're going back to 1952, just after the Second World War. And it was a time when Richard Nixon, remember him, was running for the vice presidency of the United States. And there were lots of queries about his campaign finances. He seemed to have raised an awful lot of money. He was spending a lot of money. And there were questions being asked about the propriety of that, where these finances came from and what they were being spent on. And what he did, he hired a hotel room. He got some very good speech writers around him, and he delivered what became known as the Checkers speech, which effectively saved his vice presidency. Now, what he did in later years, in the 60s and so on, 70s, let's draw a veil over that for now. I want to focus on this speech. Because what he did in this speech was he was very truthful. He outlined exactly what was going on. And then towards the end of the speech, he talked about the gifts that people had given him and how they didn't accept gifts, and his wife hadn't got a mink coat. She got a regular coat like ordinary women. But then he said they received a package from somebody in Texas. And inside it was a little puppy dog, a little cocker spaniel. And one of his daughters, his 6-year-old daughter, absolutely loved the dog. And she called it Checkers. And he looked straight into the camera and he said, "And I don't care what they say, we're keeping the dog." And that became known as the Checkers speech. It was that kind of human moment where he connected with people and they suddenly thought, maybe he's not too bad a guy after all. I'm not saying they were great judges of character, but nevertheless, the speech is a very, very fine example of how to deal with a crisis when you find yourself under pressure. And the third thing is a tip. And this is a tip for a Q&A session. If you find yourself in a question and answer session after a speech or a presentation, and you get asked a really tough question, a really, really nasty and tough question, there's a technique called neutral paraphrasing, which will allow you to respond positively. It's a 3-part technique. Firstly, somebody asks you a really nasty question, you say, "Let me clarify what you're asking." Very important phrase. Secondly, you rephrase the question in a neutral way. Neutral paraphrasing, neutral rephrasing. So if they ask you a really nasty question, let's say about your finances, you say, "Let me clarify what you're asking. It's about the finances, where they come from, where they go, how we're dealing with them, that sort of thing." Then, third part, you answer your own question in a very positive way. To anybody listening in, they've heard you ask yourself a positive question, you've rephrased or paraphrased the question, and you've delivered a positive response. To the person who asked the original nasty question, they're scratching their head thinking, how did they get away with that? Neutral paraphrasing, very powerful technique for answering the most difficult question, but you can only use it once per Q&A session. Otherwise, people can see what you're doing. So those are 3 things: risk issues and crisis management, the Checkers speech by Richard Milhous Nixon in 1952, and neutral paraphrasing, a technique that could get you out of a very deep hole should you ever need it. I wish you the very best of luck.